What's up, spacecraft collectors? Welcome to a Space Shuttle review. It's your host, Ray. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the Dragon Model 1:400 scale Space Shuttle Columbia with solid rocket boosters and external tank. In this video, I'll talk about the box, the orbiter, the external tank, and boosters, and at the end of the video, I'll give my personal opinion about what I think of the model and whether or not I recommend it to other collectors. Before I start talking, though, I'd like to provide a little bit of information about the Dragon Space Shuttle series. This is one of the more obscure model lines for model spacecraft, and Dragon released plenty of 1:400 scale space shuttles in various configurations, whether it be the launch configuration with the external tank and boosters like this one. It could be one with the crawler transporter, the 747 shuttle carrier aircraft, or just in orbit with the open payload bay doors. A few of these models were released between the early 2000s, and I believe the last one was 2010 or 2011, but overall, these were produced in very small production runs. This model specifically was released in October of 2010 per Dragon's website, and there weren't very many produced, and this is one of the more rare ones out of that entire shuttle series, and I'm very lucky to get my hands on this one. So starting off with the box as promised, this is actually the back of the box, and it's 19 centimeters lengthwise, 20 centimeters tall, and 6 centimeters wide. Aside from that, it's just a standard cardboard box. So here we can see the Space Shuttle Columbia launching for STS-107, or its final mission. That's what the configuration for the model is, STS-107, and I'll explain why later. So here's the back, bottom, and it'd be nice if it was right side up. There we go. Bottom, right side. It's a bit of information. I know that the picture is sideways, but you can try and read that if you'd like to. Top, left side, more information. And here's the front. The front allows for the model to be seen in the box. First is the orbiter sits here along with the external tank and boosters. When you open up the box, you get the external tank and boosters fully assembled, painted, and ready to go. The orbiter also fully assembled, painted, and ready to go, and a plastic display stand. This is a two-piece display stand with the base and the stand part coming together relatively easily. There's also, for some reason, an instruction sheet on how to put together the external tank and the orbiter, which is kind of an insult to our intelligence, because someone who bought this model would hopefully understand how to put this together, but at least they do have the decency to include these instructions. So yeah, there's that. So I'll start off my review with the orbiter. The fuselage length for the orbiter is 9 centimeters, wingspan is 6 centimeters, and it's 4 centimeters tall. Pretty small, but it's accurate to 1:400 scale. This part of the model is made out of both plastic and metal. The fuselage itself is made out of metal, but the wings, OMS pods, vertical stabilizer, and the payload bay doors are made out of plastic. I'm not sure about the main engines or anything like that, but it's a good mix of metal and plastic. As a result, this model is reasonably heavy for its size. So I'll start out my review at the crew cabin. So here is the crew cabin. You can see there's all sorts of tile details here. Very small detail here. It's printed pretty good for its size. There we have the name of the orbiter, Columbia, and here is our crew access hatch. You can see that the black thermal protection system line here isn't really printed all that well, and there's a few bits of white poking out, but nonetheless, it still looks pretty solid. And I'll turn this around to the front section here. You can see the RCS pod and section here. This looks pretty good. Now you'll see that the reaction control thruster holes are painted white, and this is accurate because they installed white covers in these thruster holes prior to launch to prevent wildlife and other things from getting in there. And these stayed in the RCS holes for a few seconds after launch until they just fell off. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, pretty solid so far. I do want to talk about the nose, but I'll get to that later. Moving on to the fuselage and the payload bay. The payload bay is permanently closed. The doors, like I said, are one piece and they're just permanently closed. So if you try to remove them to open them, one, why would you? Two, you're going to end up having a bad day. So there's a decent amount of detail in the fuselage here. We've got the vents, and these 3 vents being open is accurate. These 2 being highlighted and depicted on the model, I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate. I'm pretty sure they just covered these in foam insulation blankets once they were disabled in the 90s, but I'm not 100% sure. Now for the payload bay hinges, these are accurate, only that the payload bay hinges only are on the fuselage. They're not on the payload bay doors themselves, which is kind of a bit of inaccuracy. Still though, very small detail, so I'm very glad that they included that. Moving to the rear section, we've got our good looking United States title. Color seems pretty good. NASA logo is a bit questionable. Some of the alignment went wrong there. But aside from that, everything seems to be pretty solid up here. I do notice some printing inconsistency with the E there. But aside from that, it looks pretty solid. And back here, we've got our vents. We have some more vents. We got a square here and our umbilical attachment. This is pretty good. It's even got a little bit of a shade of light beige, which is accurate to Columbia. So that's a very small detail that I'm glad they included. So moving up to the OMS pods and the vertical stabilizer, these orbital maneuvering system pods, they're shaped pretty well, and you can see they do highlight the RCS holes here. However, they don't have them on either the top section back here or on the bottom. They don't have that there, so only the ones on the sides are visible. The tiles up here are accurate, at least the printing is, but the black tiles, these extend out way too far onto the OMS pod. They should be definitely smaller than this, so the printing here is definitely not accurate. As for the vertical stabilizer, this is pretty good. It's just missing a few important features, and that's because Dragon didn't want to mess with the mold. Oh, and there appears to be issues with the black paint application here too. But this extended section of black thermal protection system, this is supposed to be as a result of the silts pod that was up here. However, this is not present on this model because, like I said, they didn't want to modify the mold. Columbia is the only orbiter in the fleet that had the silts pod. The tiles here on the vertical stabilizer, on the rudder, sorry, are accurate, but there are two black tiles up here that are missing, and there's also one that was right around here that is also missing. So a few small missing details, but still would have been nice to see them. And last but not least, another mold thing is the drag chute compartment. This is also missing. Moving to the back section though, here we've got our space shuttle main engines and our orbital maneuvering system engines. These look pretty solid. They're very small, they're painted silver, but they're good. I won't complain. Now, something I'd like to point out is, as you can see on the underside of the OMS pod there, it's actually hollow. It's an open gap that they didn't paint black, and it's very hard to see from any angle, but it's still something I feel that should be brought to your attention. Move right onto the right side of the spacecraft. Here's the right side. Vertical stabilizer looks good on this side. I don't notice really any paint application issues, just a bunch of dust on here. I bought this used on eBay, so yeah, all sorts of dust. Overall, very good. As you can see, the United States title here looks good, and the American flag is in reverse. That's accurate. Now, an inaccuracy that I noticed is, as you can see, all of these little side vents are closed, when this one, and this one should be open for launch, like on the other side. So that's also another small inaccuracy. And moving on to the crew cabin, once again, we've got our Columbia title. We do have some yellow placards that are definitely thin in terms of the paint layering. As you can see, some of the tiles are poking out from under there, but they still look decent nonetheless, so I won't complain. Now, what I wanted to show you earlier, well, here's a view of the top of the orbiter. You can see the docking windows there. They don't exactly, the cockpit windows actually aren't centered with the center of the spacecraft. I'll try and demonstrate that, but yeah, they're not exactly centered. You can see they're not really centered with the RCS pod either. And getting up to the nose cone, you can see the nose cone is very triangular in shape. And the reason for this is because the nose cone is printed a little bit too high up on the nose of the orbiter. It should be down a little bit lower along here. You can definitely see, yeah, it took a very bad curve down here. It's not supposed to do that. Definitely didn't do that on the real orbiter. So yeah, the RCC nose cone printing isn't really the best, or paint application. I think that's a paint detail, not a printed detail. Moving on to our big delta wings here, we can see the left wing. They've got the chines on here. This is Columbia's signature feature that it retains through the entirety of its career. A bit of white paint is poking out from here, nothing too crazy though. And we do have printed tile detail, which is accurate to Columbia. Columbia did have this tile configuration for the entirety of its career. Got our NASA logo there. This logo was present only on missions STS-109 and STS-107. And like I said earlier, STS-107 was Columbia's final mission, and that's when it was destroyed on re-entry in 2003. So yeah, NASA logo's there. It might be a little bit too small. I'm not 100% sure, but I still think it's within acceptable margins. Got some printed details for the elevons and the hinges, or the hinge panels. These look pretty good. One thing I do notice is that for some reason the tile details do appear to poke through on some bits on the elevon hinges, so just keep that in mind. Got our American flag here and our good old Columbia name. So the wings are pretty solid. I won't complain. The RCC is painted as it should, that nice gray color. And here's the bottom of the orbiter. There's not that much to see. There's a few scratches here and there because, like I said, I bought this used, and this definitely has some shelf wear. We've got our landing gear covers installed and 3 holes for the joints to the external tank and boosters. This thing fits onto the external tank and boosters pretty easily. Let me just try and just align it properly. There you go. Once everything's aligned, just give it a little push, and it sits on there nice and tight. Here's what the model looks like with the external tank and boosters. Now right from here, I'll move on to the external tank and boosters. So if this would separate, that is, there you go. It's a very tight fit, so it's very secure. Now the external tank and boosters are also mixed plastic and metal. The boosters themselves are all metal, but the external tank is plastic. So these are pretty nicely detailed. I won't complain. The only issue or inaccuracy that I have with these is the exhaust nozzles here. These are supposed to be painted white. I don't know why a lot of model manufacturers paint them silver. They look cool, but it's not accurate. So I do need to make that note there. But aside from that, everything else seems to be pretty good. This pipe here also is not accurate. It was removed from the external tank by the time of mission STS-107. This pipe was accurate to earlier missions, but not later ones like STS-107. So yeah. Overall, details are pretty nice. Here is the bottom of the external tank and boosters. Very solid work on Dragon's part for such a smaller spacecraft model. So the external tank and boosters are quite large. The entire thing from the top of the external tank and the bottom of the boosters is 14.5 centimeters long, or no, just 14, sorry. And then we got 5 centimeters wide from booster to booster, and 2.5 centimeters tall from the bottom of the external tank to the top of the supports here. So accurate to 1/400 scale, as you saw earlier, and pretty heavy because the boosters are made out of metal. Now, the reason I say this model is in the configuration for STS-107 is because these little gray bands in between the orange bands right here. So this gray band on the solid rocket booster, this was only present on STS-107. On STS-109, this band was white. So that's why this model is in the configuration for Columbia's final mission, STS-107. So down here under the external tank, we have a giant hole for the display stand, and here's the display stand. I'll just demonstrate what the model looks like on there. If you guys saw that earlier, it just fits on pretty tightly and very securely. There we go. So the model is displayed like this on the display stand. It cannot sit up straight without leaning backwards and leaning on the tail of the orbiter, so your only option to display this thing is either if you glue it somewhere or if you put it on the display stand, which, I mean, who wouldn't want to put it on the display stand? It looks pretty cool from this position. Well, that concludes my review, and we are, despite being a long video, I'm still ahead of schedule. Let's go. Now time for my personal opinion and recommendation. So this model is solid. It does have a few imperfections here and there, but by 2023 standards, it still is pretty good. That and Dragon Model is the only model manufacturer that has produced 1/400 scale pre-built space shuttles, and they did a fantastic job. One thing I really like about this model is the tile details around the crew cabin and the wings. I don't see that on any other pre-built space shuttle models, and it still is pretty hard to replicate on model kits that I've built. I've built the Space Shuttle Columbia way more times than is healthy for a human being. I don't even remember how many times. I think it was 3 times I've built the Space Shuttle Columbia in different scales, and only once was I ever able to replicate these tile details accurately. So Dragon did a very good job on the tile details. Overall, it's a detailed model. It is missing a few things here and there, but nonetheless, I recommend it to other collectors. It still is a beautiful spacecraft, and the details are there, and it's just right for a desk model, or to fit your growing spacecraft collection. So yes, I say you should get it if you want it. And if you can find it. These things, like I said earlier, are incredibly rare, so if you want a Dragon space shuttle, whether it be Columbia or a different orbiter or a different model, get it. They're pretty solid nonetheless. Well, that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check out my channel for more aerospace content, including videos on the Space Shuttle Columbias that I did build out of model kits. And that's all I've got for you guys today. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Happy collecting. See you next time.